Welcome back to Talk the Walk. With me now is Kevin Matthews, Assistant Professor of George Mason University. Thank you very much for joining us, Kevin.
Glad to be here.
Now, you're just talking about the Munich Security Conference last week, where U.S. President Joe Biden pledged the United States' recommitment to the European alliance. Now, Biden urged European nations to join force with the United States to counter China and Russia. But some critics argued that it's the same old foreign strategy during the Obama year, and Beijing and Moscow are well prepared for that. What do you say to that?
Well, they're right in the sense that Biden, like as I said earlier, wants to go back to the status quo ante before the Trump years. But if you look at it from Europe, the United States is no longer a dependable, reliable partner, precisely because of the 4 years of America First, the Trump policy of going it alone and doing what the United States wanted to do, and frankly, the rest of the world be damned. So if you look at it from, say, London or Paris or Berlin, yes, Joe Biden is a reliable, dependable American president. They no longer have to worry about a sudden shock coming out of the White House. But they also look at American politics, and what they see is the fact that despite everything that Donald Trump did, 74 million Americans voted for him. Mm-hmm. And if you believe the pundits, there's a good chance that the Republicans will take back the U.S. Congress within 2 years, and that Donald Trump or someone quite like him will run for president on the Republican ticket in 2024. And we could be right back where we were a year and a half, 2 years ago. So it's quite logical for the Europeans to say, hold on a minute, we can't depend on the United States any longer. It's time for us to step out on our own. And from that perspective, they've got no choice, really.
So would you anticipate a deterioration between relationships of Brussels and Washington? And what does that mean for Washington's most serious competitor, and I quote President Joe Biden, China?
Well, I don't know about an end to the relationship between the EU and Washington. The transatlantic partnership will continue, but it's going to be more a partnership where the Europeans, anyway, decide that they are equals, and they might go their own way. You saw that even before Mr. Biden became president, when the EU negotiated an investment agreement with China. Now, Brussels says that this is just a leveling of the playing field, that the EU wanted to have the same rights to invest in China and vice versa as the United States already has. But from the American point of view, it is rewarding China at a time when the Beijing government is not a reliable, dependable partner. That you can't trust anything that they sign. After all, they agreed that there'd be the one China, two systems policy towards Hong Kong, and that until 2047, and that's gone by the boards. I don't think the leadership in Beijing has quite realized the damage that has been done to their reputation with the coronavirus pandemic. And then you have the problem with the Uyghur population in Western China and their treatment. That's going to be a problem, for example, in Brussels, with getting the EU Parliament to ratify this investment agreement. It might be something that Angela Merkel wants to see signed, but there's a lot of resistance to it in the Brussels Parliament because they don't think that some of the leaders there think that it doesn't have nearly enough labor protections. And given what the Beijing government has done in Western China, they're not going to go along with it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the EU investment deal with China, because it sounds to me that the European Union is torn apart between two sides. And the EU signed an investment deal with China as China became the bloc's biggest trading partners, while some EU officials are mulling actions against Beijing over its tightening grip in Hong Kong here and in Xinjiang. So what happened? Has pragmatism trumped liberal values?
Well, unfortunately, pragmatism, or if you want to put it more bluntly, money, has trumped liberal values. Take example, Germany. Germany is a very strongly, its economy is very much based on export-driven goods, such as cars. The Germans want to sell a lot of high-priced cars to Chinese customers. So whether or not they will be forced to confront the fact that there's a price to be paid, and it's being paid by Uyghur slave labor, we'll have to see.
After all this criticism mounting from European Union against China's increasingly questionable human rights records in Xinjiang and in Hong Kong, but we can see some European nations still cozying up with Beijing. For example, Italy joined the Belt and Road Initiative in 2019, and 18 of the 140 participants are EU member states. So is China turning to Europe, or is actually Europe pivoting to China despite its criticism at background?
Well, from the European perspective, they're doing it for purely business reasons, and they would maintain that they cannot fall into China's orbit. But once you have an economy, becomes more and more dependent on that trade, then it's going to be very hard to take a stand when it comes to human rights or political freedoms. And, this is akin to what I said earlier about these three blocs emerging. It seems to me that there are several challenges that are confronting the world today that are long-term challenges, but they've got immediate consequences. First is global warming. If we do not solve this problem, then everything else doesn't matter. And if this is related to the COVID epidemic, or pandemic, I should say, issues like deforestation are causing diseases like the coronavirus to spread. We've had several of these instances now, and they get worse each time. That's related to global warming and deforestation. You have another problem with the spread of authoritarianism, with frankly the Chinese Communist government, but not just them. But you see what's happening in countries like Myanmar and in Hungary and Poland, where there's creeping authoritarianism, and we haven't even gotten to Russia yet. And I would say that there's even a bit of authoritarianism when it comes to the big tech companies. You saw that this past week when Facebook shut down access to news in Australia. Mm-hmm. Now that is unheard of for a private company to try to blackmail a national government. They've come to a settlement about it, but that should be a warning to every democratic government. And then here in the United States, I'm saying this as an American, I think there's a third challenge, and that is the corruption in American politics. And I use that word corruption in the broadest sense. There's the money corruption in American politics, which is hobbling America's response to issues like global warming, like its position in the world, what it can do vis-a-vis authoritarian governments. But you see this corruption with the Republican Party, which is becoming anti-majoritarian, is becoming anti-democratic itself, and is frankly unable to confront real challenges and real crises.
To what extent do you think the deteriorating situation in Hong Kong and possibly in Xinjiang as well will substantially impact the overall EU-China relationships? And because, there's a saying that the European Union depends on the United States for its security, but it depends on China for its prosperity. Your thoughts?
Yes, the EU depends on the United States security umbrella, but that's mainly vis-a-vis Russia. When it comes to China, most Europeans, I think, would see China as a more distant issue. They would actually say that the problem is that the United States is too focused on Asia, not enough on what's going on in Europe. But yes, the EU wants to do business with China. And to that extent, they're going to want to go their own way. And again, this comes back to the problems created by Mr. Trump's America First policy. They don't see the United States as reliable when the United States right now under Joe Biden is the partner that they are used to, but within 2 to 4 years, we could be right back where we were with Mr. Trump.
You know, some analysts, they say the divide between China and the West doesn't actually lie in political or ideological system, but instead it's the difference of values and beliefs, which they argue has resulted in a different response to the pandemic. Your thoughts on this? I'm
not quite sure where they're going with that. I think that isn't it a universal belief that we all want to live in, have secure lives for ourselves and our families, that we want to have the right to say what we believe and to worship or not worship how we wish. Those are universal values. They aren't different value systems because you happen to live in Hong Kong or Honolulu or somewhere in Holland. I don't think that Western values are Western values. They're global values. They're values that we've come to accept in most parts of the world. Now, if you want to reject those values, all right, that's another issue. If the Chinese Communist Party wants to go down the road to totalitarianism, then that's their option.
Now, I know you've been critical of China, but do you believe in a new world order created under the China model? Quick thoughts.
I hope not. I don't want to live in a world that's dominated by the Chinese Communist Party. It's a repressive party. No, not
But is
at all.
it going to happen, though, in your opinion?
Well, nothing's certain in this world. I hope it doesn't happen. But I think the West generally, I think the world generally has to wake up to the fact that if they choose to go under the Chinese system, they're not going to have an easy way out of it. You know, there's a lot of governments that have accepted aid in parts of Asia and Africa that are finding that Chinese imperialism is just as distasteful as was European imperialism.
All right, Kevin, it's great to have you with us today. And for those who are watching, I'll see you next week right here on Talk to Walk. Stay tuned.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.